Okay, well, hello and welcome to a special episode of the Completely Machinima podcast. Of the regular podcast team, it's just me today. I'm Tracy Harwood, but I'm joined by two guests that I'm delighted to have the chance to speak to again. Let me welcome and introduce you to Vladimir Nadein and Dmitry Frolov. Now, Vladimir and Dmitry are the coordinators and curators behind the Against Gravity program of Machinima, at the Oberhausen International Short Film Festival, which took place between the 26th of April and the 1st of May. I think I've got that right this time, where I was actually really thrilled to be invited to participate in the panel discussion. Now, I've written a blog post that you can catch up with on our website, and also an episode where the podcast team, Ricky, Phil, Damien and myself, discuss Oberhausen too. But it's really great to have an opportunity to hear the thoughts of the organisers about the Machinima programme as well. So welcome to the show, both of you. It's great to have you here. I would like to start really by asking you each to say a little bit about your background and how you came to be interested in Machinima to start with. So do you want to just tell us a little bit about you both?
Hi everyone, and thank you so much, Tracy, for inviting us to your wonderful podcast that we were actually been following for a while already, and it's
Thank you.
such an honor to be here together with Dmitry. And yeah, my name is Vladimir Nadein, and I'm a film curator and film producer. Currently living in Taiwan, but yeah, previously I was based in Moscow. And we, together with Dmitry, we had been running Moscow International Experimental Film Festival before, where we met and where we worked for several years together. Yeah, but how actually, how I got interested in Machinima, I think there are kind of three, like, not maybe milestones, but kind of 3 points or like 3 episodes regarding that. First, I think it's like 7 years ago, I think, or maybe no, like maybe 8 years ago. I went to Whitechapel Gallery in London and seen Harun Farokhi's Parallels 1, 2, 3, and 4. And for me, it was kind of an eye-opening experience because I could see how he could use like video games in such a kind of critical way, but also like very poetical way, so it was really fascinating experience, but I didn't really thought deeply on what he was really doing. I was just like fascinated by the images, and also maybe that I used to play games a lot when I was a teenager, so it was kind of, it all get together there. And then I remember like a couple of years after, I just kind of made a like small video essay that I never showed it to anyone. I just posted on kind of Ready Mag website. So it was a kind of a collection of representation of the kind of Soviet army in the Second World War games, like in Western video games.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of, yeah, like from the games I played, I think I cut it some cutscenes, but also like just, yeah, like some kind of let's play videos. And I just put them together and just like posted randomly. And yeah, and then I think the third kind of milestone, that I was curating a film program for Venice Architecture Biennial. It was both like film program and video game exhibition. So I put like 9 films based on game engines and yeah, appropriated video games. And that was kind of a big entry point, that I could see that there's so many works done within video games. And I felt like this, what we also try to emphasize, I think, in the curatorial text, that for me, there's a kind of a liberating experience as a filmmaker, maybe, or like you can easily go to that world and do whatever you want, you know. So that's resonated with me a lot. Also, when we found this quote from Phil Solomon, that for him it was also a liberating experience. So it resonated with me like, yeah, extensively.
And Dmitry.
Yes. Hello, everyone, and yes, thanks again, Tracy, a lot for inviting us. It's a great pleasure to participate in this conversation. I think my answer will be way shorter because, well, I'm actually also a film curator and programmer, and I write a little bit about film and art. But I think I'm trying now to remember which Machinima was the first I've ever seen, and I think it was also a film by Harwood, but maybe another one, which is called Serious Games, where where this German filmmaker analyzes the phenomenon of using video games in military industries for training for soldiers, but also for working with post-traumatic syndrome. But then I think I encountered machinimas in different contexts here and where from time to time, until the moment when I think a couple of years ago I realized that it was quite a big phenomenon in the world of experimental cinema, and yeah, I started seeing more and more machinima works at different film festivals I attended. And then, but I didn't think of machinima thoroughly, and I didn't think of making a program like that until the moment when Vladimir contacted me and invited me to take part in this project. So actually, it's thanks to him that I've got involved more or less deeply in machinima.
Fantastic. Well, okay, what I was going to ask you is, how did you come to participate in the Oberhausen program? I mean, was that serendipitous, or did you approach the director, or did they approach you, or how did that happen?
No, the director of the festival, Lars Henry Gus, was generous to ask me like if I have some kind of proposal for the theme program. And I just kind of said I have some ideas around like films made within video games or game engines, and yeah, he asked like if I can draft something, and then he said like it's quite interesting, and then I immediately invited Dmitry to join me because it's quite big field, so yeah, it can be very. I think there is a space for collaboration, and it's kind of the field is so deep, so you cannot do it on your own. It's like it would be too egoistic, I think.
I think that's true. I
And
mean,
it's also about community, as yeah, you know.
Absolutely, but I think what you put together was a much bigger program than I would have anticipated that you would put together as a sort of a major theme. How did that theme kind of emerge from the discussions that you had against gravity?
I think from the very beginning we had an idea to dedicate one of the screenings to Phil Solomon, this very important figure of American avant-garde cinema, because he is a unique filmmaker who used to make 16mm analog films using a lot of photochemical processing and optical printing and all sorts of analog techniques to create almost abstract films. And then at some point he made this dramatic turn, you know, switch to machinima, which is really something that nobody could imagine before. And yeah, we just realized that probably he Phil Solomon embodies this idea of you know, looking for specificity in machinima for certain aesthetics that can be found in this medium. And I believe that somehow he managed to to keep his you know, avant-garde techniques when he started making films in GTA. Yeah, but so the Against Gravity is a title that that we got with that we sorry for my poor English. Like, it's a title that we coined reading one of his interviews. In this interview, he said that machinima liberated him from the gravity of his age and also his illness, because he had lung illness that actually had to do with physical gravity. He couldn't spend too much time being, you know, somewhere in the heights, in, you know, in mountains, for example. And yeah, so this illness forced him to feel this kind of gravity, physical gravity. So but at the same time, yeah, obviously he also saw machinima as something that can liberate, could liberate him from the weight of heavy camera equipment. Obviously, you don't need camera to make machinimas.
Absolutely, just sit in front of a screen and record. To
Exactly.
which point, Vladimir, tell us a little bit about the background that you've got there. The background, the background that you've got. Yeah, because that's really interesting as well. We were talking about this off screen just before we started the interview. Just tell us a bit more.
It's a still from the island in Second Life, but it's a quite unique island because it was made by a French filmmaker, Chris Marker. Yeah, and basically that's the island that still exists, and it's kind of acts as a museum, and also like there are two cinema spaces where you can see both films, like two films of Chris Marker. One of the prominent films he made, like Le Jeté, like a photo, like iconic photo film. But Dmitry here is more like actually has more knowledge than me and Chris Marker because he did a retrospective of his works. But yeah, and then there's also kind of a museum with images, I think, and also figures that fascinated Chris Marker throughout his life and maybe influenced his work. So yeah, I encourage you to walk on this island, everyone. It's called Uber. And there's also a machinima film based on that island.
So you to the point really where what you're doing is highlighting very different types of avant-garde kind of work using different kinds of environments. But back to the point about Against Gravity and the use of these kind of virtual environments. One of the points that I thought you've picked up on really well, very interestingly, was this discussion about the move between analog and digital. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you kind of came to that thought, you know, or programmed around that sort of thought process about demonstrating this shift between analog and digital, which, you know, I know you're just talking about there, another artist, and I don't think you showed any work by that particular artist, but yeah, tell us a little bit about this sort of analog and digital discussion that you wanted to demonstrate through your program.
I can just briefly say that it was actually one of the first ideas, like actually, you know, like it's now feels strange because when you're making a program on Machinima, like this is probably the additional thing that you might think of, you know. But there it was kind of, yeah, the title came very early of our research, so it's kind of emphasized the direction. And then I don't know, I was specifically like fascinated that how feel like being non-gamer has nothing to do with like digital art or digital filmmaking, you know, kind of found video game space also kind of maybe material in a way. That's how I feel that, you know. So I thought, oh, and we thought like maybe we should show these kind of works along together and see what happens. Also, kind of to maybe defend Machinima in a way, you know, to defend this world that's like someone who was deeply rooted in like analog filmmaking, which is very important for like experimental film communities as a whole. So that's maybe kind of defends Machinima as an art cinema, you know. But of course, we watched these analog films also like on quite poor YouTube links, you know. And for us, it was like also kind of in a way the event when we see it in Oberhausen, you know, like having these works all together on the screen. So this is kind of very specific experience, I think. So it was kind of an experiment for us as well, you know. We just like thought, okay, it might be, let's do that and see what happens.
Yeah, we basically wanted to juxtapose two cinematic apparatuses like 16 mil, because we brought the 16 mil projector inside the auditorium so that the audience could hear the sound of this cracking sound of the projector. And we screened two 16 mil films by Solomon, and then after that we screened his Machinima trilogy. And yeah, I think it was a lovely kind of experiment to feel the difference of the nature of the image. And then but apart from that, I wouldn't say that we really try to focus on this conversation about the difference between digital and analog. We really wanted to find out what Machinima was and what kind of forms can it take, and you know, like but obviously we were primarily we were primarily interested in artist film as such, and how artists approach this medium. But I believe that many of them managed to really reveal many aspects of Machinima, many fundamental traits, you know, fundamental features of Machinima. For example, we dedicated one of our screenings to the subversive strategies. We call this program "Crack the Code," and the title speaks for itself. Like the filmmakers in this participating in this program either cracked the correct video games directly by intervening, by subverting the code or the hardware of the game, or alternatively there could be films that would crack the ideologies embedded in video games, especially in such video games like those sandbox games like Red Dead Redemption. I mean, open world games, right?
Yeah.
Like Red Dead Redemption, or Second Life, indeed, that we've already touched upon.
Yeah. And what was
Yeah.
the? Sorry, Karen.
No, sorry. No, I just wanted to add like one thing about like Solomon, maybe. I think that also the title of the program that we chose was interplay. So I think it's a kind of it's an answer to your question, you know, like this is the interplay between analog and digital. So it's not like a juxtaposition, I think, in a way. And also, you
Yeah,
know,
but
there was like
juxtaposition brings a certain interplay. I think brings about.
Yeah. Well, it struck me that I mean, again, just reflecting on the background and also the Solomon's work and whatnot. The interplay that I thought that you did so well between this sort of analog and these digital ideas in the selection of the works that you'd picked, certainly the ones that I saw. I mean, and I was so regretful that I didn't manage to make it for the whole 5 days of the event. But the ones that I saw sort of demonstrated machinima in different ways. Some of them were not really sort of what we would call examples of story-based machinima, but were documentaries about people creating machinima or using machinima in some kind of way. And to my point about Marker and Solomon, the what you've got with a lot of Second Life stuff tends not to be story-based machinima, but more documentary based on what goes on in that space through the virtualization of the creative, the creator, if you like. They tend to be sort of documenting what they see. And I think quite a lot of the artworks that were shown were in that sort of frame, whereas what you got with Solomon tended to be him exploring that world, and some of the glitches in that world, which was a slightly different way of approaching the kind of world. Was that a deliberate strategy as well? Picking different types of machinima?
Certainly, we wanted to be as representative as possible. Although you totally right that we didn't really touch upon this vast part of the machinima world, namely the narrative machinimas, the machinimas that try to tell the viewers a story. But I don't know, like I think we just it's a matter of our background. We've been interested in avant-garde cinema and experimental film for many years, and maybe this is a slightly subcultural approach and maybe a childish approach in a way, but we just we see avant-garde film and experimental film as a certain underground, whereas because this is what happens with cinema in general. Narrative cinema is a mainstream one, right? And
well, if you can argue that YouTube is mainstream,
yeah. YouTube, but it's a good point. YouTube is a new television, right? And television has been fighting with cinema in a way, and maybe absorbing cinema for ages. But so maybe YouTube is now the major mainstream. But we try to touch upon. I think there were a couple of films that could be called narrative in our program, but in general we try to represent different artistic strategies, which means strategies common in the art world and among major film festivals, experimental film festivals. So yeah, but I wonder what do you think in terms of this um, level of representation? Have you managed to see at least one machinima, one method of machinima that were unfamiliar to you?
In the film festival, in your film festival?
Yes.
Most of it, I wasn't familiar with many of the films, but you know, when I was thinking about that, actually, I realized that a lot of the distribution strategy that artists and creators of experimental works, the strategy they use to distribute the work isn't the same as the more community-based work that I tend to see and that we tend to review on the podcast, to be honest. I guess, you know, in some ways what we could say is we're a little bit lazy with how we go about selecting the machinima that we review. But it just doesn't come across our desk. You know, we're not a festival, we're not a gallery, we're not an event. And therefore, you know, how do we get access to this experimental work? And I think that's a real challenge. I think that's it's an interesting challenge that really can only be solved by the kinds of things that you've done with Oberhausen, which is to reflect a program of work that demonstrates the way in which this kind of creative practice is being explored across a breadth of different types of creators, which is what I think you really successfully showed in the program. I guess one of the questions I've got for you is, what was the reception to the program from the audience that went along to it? Obviously, they were other filmmakers primarily. I guess many of them analog filmmakers, not so many machinima type filmmakers. Certainly, I didn't see many that I would have recognized, I think. What was the response to it?
Yeah, I think at least what we kind of the direct response we've got. Like, I think a lot of people were really fascinated and also like never heard of machinima as such, you know, like even, which for me was surprising, some like professors that are teaching media even like approached us like, oh wow, this is completely new thing, you know, to me. And yeah, this was like, really, like there is still like holes that you can open to people, you know, because you think like there's nothing to kind of open to, you know. So it was really, it was a pleasure to hear feedbacks like that, you know.
It was really surprising to receive that kind of response, knowing that the phenomenon has been there for more than 20 years, you know, and it's but still, yeah, most of the audience at Oberhausen, they really hadn't known about machinima before. Maybe some of them, I think they could watch a couple of films made in video games, but they didn't know the term machinima, and they didn't know that it it has such a, you know, big history and diverse forms. So yeah, the most common response was fascination, interest, and how to say, like gratitude to what we've done.
Absolutely, and highly commendable in terms of what you've done as well. What kind of questions did you get asked by that audience then, sort of, you know, behind the scenes, so to speak?
I think one of the most interesting type of questions was related to the technology of filmmaking, like how the filmmakers managed to make that kind of films. But obviously the answer is different in different cases.
But also think that the need I mean, I had this anticipation, but then I think people before coming to the program there was kind of this myth that you should be a gamer to be able to perceive these films, you know. And I think we could, yeah, how you say, like erase this myth, you know, like yeah, people could, yeah, people understood that it's not appropriate, it's not mandatory to be video gamer, like or gamer, or like ever experience the game before like going. And I think that's kind of it's very important point.
Yeah, I mean, that's true for quite a lot of machinima, but sometimes the game adds a layer that makes, well, that creates a different level of message, doesn't it? That's the kind of point with machinima. You've got the game context, the code context, the story context, the creative context, and all of these kinds of things into play to create the kind of unique narrative that you get with machinima that you almost don't get in any other form, I think. Okay, well, I think I suppose really I don't know if you've seen this. Have you seen Sam Crane's an article in the Conversation? Did you read that recently? No?
Yeah, Sam Cranes, yeah, he's
Yeah.
the tech, yeah.
Yeah. So Sam who basically won the Critics Award for his version of Hamlet in Grand Theft Auto, made this quite pertinent point in this article, which is, for those of you who don't know, it's an online, mainly academic journal. But he made the point that the view of cinematic gatekeepers of machinima works has tended to be that they are trivial and gamer geeky, and you've kind of sort of said that maybe this is finally being dissolved, and he made that point too, that maybe that view of machinima is finally being dissolved thanks to your efforts at Oberhausen. Do you think that's true? Did you find a lot of resistance at all? Did you find any resistance
Against machinima.
Yeah.
I think maybe in a short film world, from what I perceive right now, I think it's more accepted. But maybe this, I mean, of course, for example, like the work by Total Refusal, for example, like like not the only last piece made by them, Hardly Working, but also other films. But this also is widely shown across like film festivals. But it's like still concentrated. Like I would like to see more machinima works by different artists in different film festivals. But I think still short film world is more ready for that. And in world of the feature films, that could be like really challenging, I think, to get in. Even though there one great film was made recently, Meets Island, by French Vio, that we also showed their short work, Marlowe Drive. This work recently won in Vision de Réel, a very big film festival in Switzerland. It's a documentary made in survival game called Daisy. Maybe I don't know if you show like here the trailer at
well, I'll certainly put a link to it.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think yeah, in a feature film world, or it will be resisted a lot, I think.
Well,
also, from various points. No, I think it's like it will come from both like aesthetics, copyright laws, I think, because big producers and they won't risk without having permissions, I think, and it will kind of prevent them of doing the films in video games, I think.
Well, we'll
if
come
we
back to
about
that point.
appropriating video games, not like game engines, you know, it's already other discussion, I think.
Exactly.
But I don't know, what's your take, Dino?
No, I totally agree. I think this is what stops machinima evolving into really something big and among big platforms and big Hollywood studios. this legal status, the gray zone of the legal status of machinima. But I also think that the times are changing, and like this medium is becoming more and more prominent in this kind of if not commercial sectors, commercial section of the moving image production, but at least in the field of contemporary art and artist moving image, which can eventually evolve into you know something into the situation when a machinima would be accepted by bigger players in the industry. Although at the same time I know very little about obviously there was this Mandalorian TV series, and but I think it was made by means of game engine, so it's completely it's a slightly different thing. It was made in a collaboration with big studios and the developer of this game engine. Is that correct?
It is. I mean, you're talking about machinima as a practice versus machinima that's based inside a game world, if you like. And really what you're talking about is machinima techniques and tools being based in Unreal Engine, for example, or Unity or whatever, where they're creating the virtual world and then using it as a 3D real-time virtual environment to act with on a stage, basically. And that's basically using machinima techniques. That's Mandalorian, acting with the virtual set in real time, but using the 3D virtual environment as the set rather than a real set, so to speak.
Right.
And that's machinima techniques completely. And in many ways, that's what I thought artists like Alice Bucknell were also doing. I mean, she'd created her virtual Mars and different versions of it, as I understood it. And maybe you can correct me on this, but I understood that she'd created them in Unreal Engine and then filmed them within that virtual world and created her short narrative pieces of those 3 different worlds in that space. So she'd used it in much the same way that larger filmmakers would have used as well. And that's really what the potential of it is. You can quickly, relatively easily put together your own digital set in a 3D environment and create your own story worlds. And that's, as I understand it, how that's basically what I call the Marvelization of filmmaking, really, where you've got film, games, theatrical production, theme park ride kind of thing, all coming out of the same assets.
Right. Yeah, but one can raise the question of whether it's still machinima or not, because it makes it very similar to basically just another form of 3D animation, software, and it brings machinima far away from the original phenomenon, which was basically making films in video games by playing video games.
That's also very true, but it's that broad, I think. On the one hand, you've got homemade story worlds versus fan-based story worlds. That's kind of how it's been for 20 odd years. I think it's really quite an interesting one. What do you think are the main takeaways from your experience then at the festival? What do you feel the takeaways were for the audience from it?
Well, I think at least some members of the audience became machinima fans, as far as I can judge by conversations with them. Also, I can say that the attendance was really good. Almost all screens were sold out, and I hope that the for the festival, it was a great success. And I think, yeah, the media coverage was also nice. Many German, both local and maybe bigger newspapers and magazines wrote about Machinima. It was wonderful. Although most of the articles were in German, so not so many of your listeners would be able to read them, I suppose, but still, maybe with the
Google Translate is
exactly.
brilliant.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think there is a great takeaway for Vladimir and myself, because I don't know, maybe I can say for myself, I got very interested in Machinima over the course of working on this project, but also I started thinking of it maybe from a little broader perspective, which probably can be described by this term virtual filmmaking, because I also see a lot of similarities between Machinima and desktop cinema, because both one of the most common technology to produce Machinima is the screen capture technology, just to extract images from the game, right? And desktop cinema makes the same thing. And now I am interested in looking for like in digging into this world, trying to maybe read more about that, to get closer to this phenomenon, and maybe I hope I'll manage to maybe work on another project related to these things.
And Vladimir, what do you think?
Takeaways. Yeah, I think I mean, that's just like a nice thing that already happened, that one program traveled to Oslo, to Norway.
I saw that. That looked great. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it was just like such a like quick, thing that happened, and yeah, we were really happy to do that. And like personally, I think now I really want to dig in like early days of Machinima more, because it's obviously, yeah, it's more difficult, and you know it much more than us. But yeah, and also I'm very much became interested in like early days of video games, and like digging into some rare games and think of how they can be used today. And yeah, like, so certainly like in media archaeology, but within, yeah, video game spaces, because I don't really know much about like early 90s games, or like some machinimas. But like, for me, it would be interesting to find some kind of political machinimas of the early days, like Alex Chance, for example.
That's not early days. That's 2005.
Yeah, it's like already 10-year-old machinima.
Yeah. I see. Well, I was thinking you were going back to sort of the mid-90s, because there's quite a few. There's some actually on the Internet Archive that you can dig out. And super ironically, Phil from the podcast here has just or is just in the process of completing a project of restoring some of the very early films that were parts of an old website called Machiniplex, which I think they go back to about 2004, 2005, but they were older films than that. You might be really interested in that, where he's used AI to restore the films to make them more acceptable for the current viewing audience. Because I suppose really that was one thing that I kind of noticed, that a lot of machinima films, and this is a question for you as well, a lot of machinima films have never been made for the big screen, and you know, like you guys, when I did the festival in 2007, I can remember thinking through that quite a lot about what are we going to see on the big screen that will change the perspective of what the original creator of that film actually intended when it was originally meant for distribution through computers. And I guess I was a little surprised that it wasn't something that the filmmakers that you'd gathered around in Oberhausen really seemed to reflect on overtly anyway. And I just wondered, did you give that some thought as well?
We certainly thought of that when we were considering including earlier Machinima works, because we thought, okay, we cannot show this piece by Hugh Hancock, for example, because it's just a video file with such a poor bitrate and
Yeah.
the ratio, you know, the quality of the image would be awful, and we decided to leave this. But at the same time, I think when it's a very difficult question, a very deep question, because obviously the video game aesthetics is way more. I wouldn't say like singular, but it's so different from the photographed image, right? And indeed, it's sometimes like watching these videos on a big screen would be could be quite strange, because you would see all these simple textures, you know, these big pieces of you know, colored pixels, and but it could make the film looks maybe even silly, but surprisingly, maybe it's just because the vast majority of the films we included were made in recent years, where like which means in video games that have quite elaborated computer graphics, right? But maybe but maybe the reason is also the in the fact that the filmmakers, I mean the artists who use video games to produce their films, managed to open up something really fascinating in video games, and that eventually the audience perception was very positive. And while watching all these films, I rather enjoyed. And I didn't think of the, you know, just maybe a couple of times I thought, oh, okay, it looks a bit. I mean, the image is a bit poor on this big screen, but in general, I enjoyed all the films so much, and I was immersed in the nature of each work. So that's yeah, I would say that maybe not every machinima, but like machinima in general, the current state of machinima has its own place in cinemas, in cinematic environments.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think's the legacy from your perspective of how this event went? What do you think? What do you think others will take from it?
Yeah, I think they'll definitely. I mean, I'm curious to see, like in the coming years, maybe also programs on Machinima in some festivals, or maybe we will be able to do it like in that or that form or some kind of different form. I'm sure it will happen because, you know, like Oberhausen also like a film festival where like a lot of film professionals are coming. So I think it will definitely affect but also maybe someone would like to write about it. I don't know, like I will be curious to see what kind of legacy it will have, you know. Maybe, I don't know, maybe new Machinima festivals will be established, you know. There's one great in Milan, Milan Machinima Festival that you know, and we are also, yeah, really grateful for their work and what they have been doing. It's really, yeah, it's very important, and maybe there will be more of that. I don't know. Certainly, yeah, we'll have to see.
Maybe, yeah, maybe even at the Oberhausen Film Festival. We'll see. Yeah.
Well, I think you've left an important legacy because, you know, you're right. There have been other festivals that have included machinima, quite a lot of festivals over the years, but none that have tackled it in the way that you have, I think. And I think you've put a real marker in the ground and opened the challenge up for other major festivals, but more major festivals even, to think about how they include this kind of practice and also recognize the you know, the name that it has, although maybe that name doesn't quite fit it anymore. I don't know. Do you feel that there are some next steps to take from your perspective?
There is a thing that I'm excited and at the same time frightened about, you know, and with I'm talking about all these new VR technologies. You know, Apple introduced their new VR kit recently, and I think Meta is about to introduce their new version of how's it called?
Yeah.
Quest, something like this.
Oh yeah, next Quest. Yeah.
Yes, next Quest. And I think this is something. I mean, it seems that these technologies developing really fast and significantly, and I think one need to look at this like thoroughly and keep an eye on what's going on there, both in terms of the apparatus of the moving image there, but also the artistic strategies. I haven't seen too many really good virtual reality artworks and films yet. I haven't seen many of them yet, but I believe they will emerge for sure.
I guess they will. I mean, you know, maybe what you're looking at, it isn't the same kind of experience at all, is it? It's a completely different kind of thing that you do in a VR experience than sitting and watching a film, because you have an active role in many ways.
Sure. Yeah. But the games are moving into this kind of dimension as well.
Well,
so
I think that's a natural way to take the VR experience, is more sort of immersive experience rather than cinema, perhaps. But it'd be really interesting to see what that does mean for cinema experiences, if indeed they can find a killer app for the VR headsets that are being launched. I don't know what it will be. I mean, I've been sitting and watching this one for some time. In fact, Hugh was one of the first to create a VR experience. I think it was called Left Hand Path, and I think that was launched in about 2017. Hugh Hancock, that is, who was the founder of the machinima.com website and who coined the term. So he's, you know, he was one of the very early pioneers in that field as well. No surprise. But like you, I haven't seen an awful lot of cinematic experiences through that, beyond actual games and adventures. So it'd be interesting to see what happens there. Well, I was gonna, so it's quite interesting you said, say watching the technology, but what kinds of experimental themes are you thinking that are likely to be explored in future festivals? Have you kind of got any idea on where the directions of experimental works might go?
I mean, in general, like experimental film, or
Yeah,
like...
what yeah, and what in terms of what you're perspective is on how this field is developing.
One of the programs we dedicated one of the programs of our project at Oberhausen to the certain kind of cinephilia in machinima world, where filmmakers try to recreate their favorites, just to recreate parts of their favorite films, or follow the style of their favorite filmmakers, like David Lynch, for example, or Pier Paolo Pasolini. We had a piece on that, and I think this can be quite an interesting direction for development, while the technology is becoming more and more accessible. I think more and more people, more and more film buffs will become, like, filmmakers themselves will become will try to recreate their favorite pieces, but at the same time, I think the probably the most significant style of, or maybe not the style, but the most significant type of machinima is a critical machinima in the world of experimental film. Artists just try to understand the virtual world by means of machinima, understand of really different aspects of this world from a certain critical distance.
Yeah, and of course, as I was going to say, there's lots of new types of games being launched, which provide lots of opportunity for doing that if they're going to make game-based work. Sorry, Vladimir, you were going to say.
No, I was just like about to say that I think that, or maybe just my wish actually, that I'm kind of, I think I wish, as I said, like that in World of Machinima there'll be more diverse selection of games actually being appropriated, like as one of our colleagues and like new friends that we met at the festival counted how many films were made within GTA 5, and it's like still kind of and it's not a secret, it's still the majority of, films or machinima, experimental machinimas is still made within video game, within GTA, which is quite obvious why, but I would like to see more game selection actually.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think GTA has run its course, but I think that's probably the nature of the filmmakers that you're that are working with this medium at the moment, which is why I think that the YouTube community has got a much more diverse strategy with the engines that it selects, and some of them not really wedded to any one particular game, whereas early machinima creators tended to stick to one game, and GTA being one of the more sophisticated environments that emerged, I guess, became something that was quite popular, and people have just stuck with it, I suppose. But I don't think the graphics now are as great as some of the other stuff that we're seeing coming through, really.
Yeah.
I mean, Warhammer 40K, for example, it's kind of pretty incredible. And then we last month we actually picked up on it's just kind of a much older game, a flight simulation game, but used to create some incredible narrative-based machinima, of course, but some really interesting commentary on the technology in the game and the lore in the game, I suppose.
Yeah.
Well, I've got some other questions that I would kind of like to ask, but it might be a good time to sort of just ask you a little bit about copyright and where you think this whole issue around copyright might be going, and how that can be overcome in the festival context.
Yeah, that's why actually my kind of answer and question towards your question about what are the next steps, and Dmitry was speaking about like virtual reality, and I think, and here we'll like speaking maybe more like from film producer side. I think the maybe sort of a protocol should be created. You know, also if, like as I said, like short film world is more like not resisting towards machinima, but as a feature film world, is yeah, will really try to prevent, I think, of video games go into to film industry on bigger scale. So I think maybe people that are interested in like they should create sort of a protocol, I guess, how to use that or how to speak to game developers, because it's really nobody wants to deal with a rock star, for example. It's like, you know, it's better not to make this film, I guess, you know, or other, you know, it's just easier not to deal with that, and that's quite frustrating. Also, maybe not only for the film festivals, but also some kind of film grants. You know, if the filmmaker wants to have some budget for making the film, even though maybe it's not that big because you kind of you appropriate the video game. Maybe you need for some post production and sound and etc. But still, you know, nobody wants to deal with that without having particular steps of what you have to do. Because I mean, I was talking to some lawyers and everything is so blurry, you know, like, so yeah, I would stay for sort of a protocol or just being copyleft in that sense. Uh, but you can do it only on your own, not like working with producer or
Unfortunately, copyleft strategies don't work with big institutions. They always rely on the legal process and like the legislation, and so I think you know it's like looking at what's going on now. I believe that it will be the constant kind of struggle, constant um,
yeah,
uh, struggle between people who want to capitalize on machinima production and the uh, horizontally structured way of filmmaking that 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 goes beyond capitalist uh, um, process strategies. You know, like people will invent ways how to make and distribute works. Then capitalists would uh, invent certain framework how to capitalize on what these people do. Then again, another stage of looking for another lacuna where filmmakers can continue making what they want to do. So yeah, I think it's uh, this story behind the director mode in GTA speaks for itself. You know, this tool invites you to create films in GTA, but at the same time, you have to follow certain you know rules, certain framework. Um, and as Vladimir said, nobody knows what will happen when, for example, Machinima work wins the Cannes Film Festival, for example, and or like or an Oscar, for example, or something like that, which will make it so like popular or so big that obviously Rockstar wouldn't be happy of just letting it go, you know, and not capitalizing on that. So again, it's I think it just one need to wait and see what's
I
what will
think
happen.
you know you're going through the same thought processes that a lot of the community have gone through over the years, and I'm always minded by one of the things that Hugh Hancock actually did say, which is when I think he came to the end of his Bloodspell trilogy that he created, and he basically said machinima, if you were starting out, would never be a way that you would choose to make films. And I think what's really interesting is the fact that with the Unreal and the Unity strategy of making assets available to creators, almost this issue now has been sidestepped, and it's a question of what you put in that 3D environment that makes that your own environment, and then how you can kind of use it, and what layer of the game law you might try and then apply to those kind of new virtual worlds that you might kind of create. So it's sort of, we're almost sort of fudging the edges of what traditional machinima is and how it slides into virtual production in these kind of new worlds, and how you then sidestep some of the copyright issues such as you can, or the transformative use issues, or the parody issues that we are seeing emerge again and again and again with the use of this kind of work. I suppose really I was kind of intrigued by the fact that many of the creatives that are using this are also selling their work to collectors and galleries, and how then that work sidesteps the copyright issues when in that kind of process. Or maybe the galleries don't care, I don't know.
It's a good question. I have no idea because there are a number of works we showed that are in like in several art collections, and one of them was made in Second Life, but I don't know whether they cleared the rights and where they dealt with the Second Life developers to have a deal on that. It's a good question.
It's interesting. Second Life always made it very clear in their T's and C's that creators could use any of the content. The issue there isn't with the developer, but the people that own the assets that have been filmed. So it's the other creators, and you'll find that there are sort of soft agreements that are shared between creators when they go on to different islands and film on those different islands, which is kind of an interesting approach with how that particular world has developed for filmmaking. So do you think you would ever consider doing more traditional or including more traditional machinima in a festival environment from YouTube or Vimeo?
Yeah, that's what I was also like saying when we were talking about takeaways, like maybe, I mean, during our research, we dug into the early days of machinima, for example, but of course we are not that, we couldn't call ourselves experts in on that period, but of course, what you're asking, it's not only about early days, but it's also about today's machinima. I would certainly try that, but again, like as Dmitry said, like our background is a bit like is a bit different. So maybe we should also still try to find more like experimental machinima in these spaces in like Vimeo or YouTube. Or
I think it's a matter of proper framework, and I would definitely be interested in showing many classic machinimas, many narrative films, narrative machinima works, and that's why I've got quite interested when you said that you were working on the restoration of some of them, which because again, one of the biggest challenges with showing early machinima is the matter of the image quality. So it would be great to maybe discuss these films that you've restored separately. So yeah, but I believe we'll find a proper framework to, if not dedicate a big program to narrative machinima, but at least to include many works of that kind to our future programs.
Well, that sounds like an opportune point to stop. I need to put you in touch with Phil. It's not me that's done the restoration work. It's Phil, and I think he's been talking to Ricky about that. So he's definitely the man to speak to on that.
Nice.
But listen, I just want to say a massive thank you for taking the time out to just talk to us about your Oberhausen Short Film Festival program Against Gravity, and your thoughts on next steps. Vladimir, Dmitry, thank you so much for joining me, and I'll look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you so much. Yes, look forward. Thank you, Tracy. Bye.
Bye.